Hello. Hey, Jamie, can you hear me?
Yeah, got you now.
All right, great.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, we can hear you, Mike.
Okay. Okay. I had to hit the start broadcast button. Okay.
Here we go.
All right. Can you guys see my screen?
We can.
Okay. Awesome. This is going to work. A little slow, but that's okay. Okay. Let's see, presentation. You guys can see that?
Yes.
Okay. Excellent. Okay. I think we're good. I think we can roll through that, then do a quick demo and wrap things up. How are we going to kick this thing off?
Yeah.
Dave will introduce you, Mike.
Okay.
So Mike, just send me a quick, couple of lines so I don't either over strengthen you or under strengthen you. So just give me some highlights. I'm going to make you sound like a big shot, so I want you to know that.
All right. Let's see.
We have, Mike, we have 33 people that have signed up so far through this morning.
Okay. Yeah, no worries.
That's great.
I believe we already have Tyler from Golden Corral. I think is already on the WebEx.
Excellent. Let's see. What have I done?
History, whatever history you got. Following a bit of Palo, and prior to Palo, that's all we need to do. So you got 15, 20 years in the system?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Perfect. I can take it from there.
There you go. Yeah.
Thanks.
I mean, I've worked all kinds of places. I've done all kinds of stuff. I got all this gray in my beard, not for lack of inexperience.
Understood.
That's what most of my teammates call me, graybeard.
All right. Well, good. So
I wear that with like a badge of honor.
Yeah, there you go. So over the next 10 minutes, you don't have to go through these slide by slide. Just highlight it quickly for Jamie so he knows what we're going to be talking about and emphasize the things that you and I and Josh discussed when we first put this thing together.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, the whole approach is talk about, integration and automation and why that's important. So we'll kind of give them a lay of the land of what we've been teaching folks as as a security industry over the last 20 years, what the limitations are around that. We'll look at a couple of things around, how people are actually working in reality. A couple of different reports, one from the Piedmont Institute, one from Cisco, that talks about, in reality, we get overwhelmed with alerts, and the only way to overcome that is to automate the process of being able to analyze and look at things. We'll talk a little bit about our philosophy, how it has been from the inception of the company, and how we build products around that and what that brings to bear. And then really it is about making all of these things work together, lay out kind of what our product mix is and where those play. So firewalls, endpoints, cloud applications, and the ability to go in and drill into all that data that we collect from all these points and do actual threat hunting. Show how our threat intelligence cloud really is the primary differentiator for us, and how it pulls all that data together, not only from what we get, but what we get from some third parties. Show them really where it needs to be deployed. It's not just about the internet perimeter. It really needs to be at all the critical places where it needs to be done. We'll give them a little overview of what, not what we're saying, but some third-party anecdotal evidence of, information that comes back from some polling that our analysts do around our partner community and what their customers are asking for. We show it from a little different perspective from a different analyst. And then looking at, ease of deployment, because it really comes down to the more complex a system is, the harder it is to deploy, the harder it is to get in, set up and going, the more likely there is going to be human error, or it's not going to be set up correctly. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we'll drive into, not only do we think our products are the best, but we also believe they have to be properly deployed. And some of the tools that we have to help do that, from a best practices assessment, a capability feature heat map adoption heat map, security lifecycle reviews, prevention posture assessments. I'll walk through kind of what those are and where their use cases are. So some of them are used, for a customer that's, a net new customer that really hasn't ever engaged with Palo Alto Networks. There's a process that we can go through to help them see kind of where they are and where they want to go, lay out a roadmap for the next, 18, 24 months, whatever that is. And then for an existing customer, we really do want to make this a regular cadence of our business, going back in and making sure they're utilizing the product that they've purchased to the fullest, capabilities and feature sets that's available to them. And then also making sure that it's set up and configured properly to our best practices, because we do realize that if you don't set the products up properly, you're probably still going to have a problem. So we have tools to automate that, make that very easy, and we'll walk them through that. And then from there, it's just jump into a demo. So and we'll go into the actual demo itself.
So,
yeah, go ahead.
The whole new strategy around Palo is a platform versus an architecture.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Do you want to change that and make platform everywhere because it's consistent with what everything is driving, and then talk about architecture below the platform?
I don't understand your question. Not to me.
Okay, so the whole new strategy around is the next, instead of next generation firewall, it's all about the security operating platform.
Correct.
And okay, do we want to talk that, or just leave it as it is in architecture? And that's up to you technical people, because this is going to be more technical than sales.
Well, the whole concept is that all of those, what makes a security operating platform is all of those components working in an integrated and automated fashion. That is what makes it a security operating platform. The areas of architecture is where you need to have components deployed. So you have to have, we talk in a lot of terms about having certain solutions deployed at the internet perimeter, and that's certainly one of the key areas of architecture, but you also need to have a zero trust architecture with, internal segmentation on the inside of your network. You need to have micro segmentation inside your data center. You need to have the same features and capabilities at your branch office locations. You need to have similar security protections because the internet perimeter is all blurry now because people have moved things to SaaS applications like Office 365 and Salesforce and Dropbox and other applications where the data, resides completely outside of their data center, and their users can actually access it completely outside of coming into their network. They can access it, directly from their computer, from the internet. They can access it from their phone. So that's the point of all of that, is to talk through, where you need it from an architecture perspective. That doesn't change the fact that it's a security operating platform, and all those components are all working together to share information and make the threat landscape, more protected. So if we learn of something from an endpoint, we share that with the firewalls. We also share that with our applications that monitor those SaaS applications. So they all get smarter.
Okay.
Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah,
Guys,
just one other
Dave,
quick point. Yep, go ahead.
we got customers joining on, so let's try to
Okay.
just get prepared for the presentation.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right.
Yep, we're good.
Okay. Perfect. See you in a little bit.
Yep.
Good morning, everyone. This is David Sawyer, Vice President of Security Practice at 5S Technologies. We're just going to wait a couple of more minutes. We still got people logging in, and then we'll get started. I'll come back and make some introductions around the table. Thank you. Okay, everyone, we're going to give it one more minute, and then we'll get started. Again, good morning, everyone, and thank you for taking time to join our call today. And I wanted to just take a few minutes and make some introductions here. We're pretty fortunate in that we have the channel engineering lead for Palo Alto for the Eastern region. And Mike has been in the business for a long time. He's started out as an account SE in Georgia and moved through to working with the channel partners throughout the Eastern region. He has over 25 years working in the security networking business and understands everything that most people run up to. And this is a format where you have the ability to send text and chat, and we'll answer the questions as we go through this. So, Mike, I'll turn it over to you, and welcome, and thank you very much for taking the time.
Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate it very much. So, yeah, guys, I've been doing this for a long time, getting the opportunity to work with customers and partners up and down the East Coast. So I get to see a lot of different things and see things from some different perspectives. And today, what I really wanted to talk to you guys about is really, where technology has changed and where we can really leverage the capabilities of integration and automation, and how those things can really bring some good security protections to your environment. So I just wanted to kind of walk through that. As we look at this, traditional security for, the last 20 or so years, and really what we've been, trained and teaching customers to do is to buy kind of, what we always called, defense in depth, but really it came down to kind of best of breed type products. And it ended up with a huge landscape of point products trying to solve a particular problem that the existing solution that was already in place didn't really solve. So that went from having a firewall to adding an IPS behind that, adding URL filtering, put in DNS protections, put in sandboxing. And before long, you had, I've talked to customers that have somewhere north of 60 different security products that they're trying to manage and maintain in their environments. And it really creates a disconnected security posture, meaning that none of those point products really communicate or share that intelligence information with each other. They're usually managed by different teams. Many organizations are somewhat fairly siloed, meaning that the network team generally manages the firewalls. The security operations team kind of defines the security policies for those. The desktop support team generally manages the network, the endpoint antivirus solutions. And in a lot of organizations, those groups, don't really share information well, don't really communicate and work well together. So it creates this disconnected environment. And people have spent tons and tons of money on buying these appliances and getting them installed. And the burden that goes onto their staff to be able to support those and keep them up to date is really challenging. And it creates a lot of noise in the network. And it's hard for people to focus on the things that are really important that could really lead to a major security breach. And that's really what we're trying to move the industry away from, is to realize that, hey, we really need all these components working together. We need all these teams looking at the same data. And we need some way to be able to prioritize the things that are really important and stay focused on those and lose some of the noise. And that's really kind of what this picture depicts, is what we've really been doing. The other challenge with that is it's, okay, maybe you could do all these things at the internet perimeter, but how do you take those things and move it into the cloud? How do you move, if you have components of your organization that are moving into public cloud, whether it's Azure or AWS or Google Cloud, whatever that is, this architecture gets very hard to transfer into one of those environments. It's also hard to take this thing and move it out into those branch locations. So you need the same protections in all areas of your infrastructure. It's hard to do that. Many times they require manual response. So somebody has to be watching these things and then taking action on it. And that can be very challenging as well. So that's kind of the landscape of what we're looking at today. And what it really leads to is an environment that's extremely complex, fairly expensive, not only from the hardware, but also the ongoing operational and maintenance costs that's associated with it. It requires a larger number of staff. And with that, it can create gaps because of the lack of communication. And with that, you end up with more risk. And that's really what we've seen in the industry, is that people have spent a lot of money. If you look at most of the breaches that make the paper, it's not because they didn't have a firewall. It's not because they didn't have IPS. It's not because they didn't have antivirus. They had security products in place. They just weren't working well together. And that's why they were able to circumvent the security solutions that were in play. And what we really want to do is kind of look at it from a different perspective. And here's the reality of the world. There's a couple of reports here. This one's from the Piedmont Institute, and they looked at, just average security organizations. And on average, an average size organization has about 14,000 endpoints, so probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,000 to 5,000 employees. Not a super large company, but fairly sizable. Most of them will have somewhere on average about 17,000 alerts that'll come in on any given week. And of those, because of the limitations in staffing, they can really only investigate about 4% of those. So their ability to actually focus on things they should be focusing on is very challenging in that type of environment. Here's another one from Cisco. I think this one was pretty interesting in that, when they looked at things that were material breaches, so things that actually caused a material impact to their financial performance, 93% of those had some type of security alert. But the reality is of those that were, they had technology in place that was alerting on the events, 44% of them aren't investigated at all. They just don't have the time or the resources to be able to get through to actually look at them. Of the ones that do actually get investigated, over half of those are never remediated. So even the things they know that they have a problem, they need to remediate, they just don't, because they don't have the time. And so this is where automation really comes into play, because if you're relying on a human resource to actually go do these things, it's almost never going to get done to the level that it needs to be done to provide high levels of security. And the bad guys have figured this out. They use automation all the time. So when they create attacks, they create new types of targeted attacks that are coming after an organization, they can use automation to their advantage, whereas the good guys generally have not been doing this in the past. So we've really got to flip the scale to make this harder for the attacker to be able to do this, but then also leverage the automation and the integration between all the critical places we need to put security resources to ensure that we're staying current, that we're staying up to date with today's attacks. And so it really comes down to, this is really our philosophy from a Palo Alto Networks perspective of how we organized and designed our company and what we build security products around. And the first thing that we focus on, and this was the key tenet of why Palo Alto Networks was started, was to have visibility into all the applications and understand that today's world, almost everything runs over port 80 or 443. That's thousands of applications coming into your environment. If you can't differentiate between Facebook, browsing in Facebook chat or a Facebook app or, HBO, Netflix, those types of things. If you can't see to that level of understanding of what the applications are, it's very hard for you to do anything with it. We also want to understand the users, not just the devices that are connecting, but who the actual user is so we can control what resources they get access to. And we need to be able to do this, whether that traffic is encrypted, whether it's on the private network, whether it's in a SaaS application, whether it's in public cloud, whether it's on a mobile device. We need to have complete visibility of what's happening in the environment. That's a key tenet of where we start. And then from there, once we understand what's being seen, we can greatly reduce the attack surface. So we can limit the applications we want to allow to run in our environment to only those that are required to run our business. Everything else, we're going to go ahead and block it, not allow it into our network. We can block the bad applications. So a lot of those peer-to-peer applications or some of the file sharing applications. These are really high risk applications, and maybe they don't make sense to allow 42 different file sharing applications to run in my environment. Maybe I'll limit it down to 3 or 4 that I need to run my business that I can get good control over and block the rest of them. This will get you about 80% of the protection. Just reducing the attack surface and doing this well will really, really limit a lot of the bad things that can happen in your environment. So with this, we get about 80% of the protections without even turning on any of the security features, just looking at the traffic that's going on and making sure that it is what is necessary to run our business. From there, we want to be able to prevent all the known threats. So all those things that are out there that are just, commodity type malware, exploits, command and control, malicious websites, bad domains, phishing sites, those kind of things, we want to make sure that we just prevent those. That's just table stakes kind of stuff. If we can do this, this will get us about 90% of the protections that we need in place because most organizations are so porous, these attacks still work quite a bit. So being able to prevent the known stuff should be just table stakes that everybody should be able to do. So we look at that as a key tenet of what we do. And then to get us to that next 9 and a little bit beyond that, we want to detect those net new threats, things that we haven't seen before, things that are specifically targeted to a specific organization, and make sure we do those. And this is where our threat intelligence cloud really comes into play. Leveraging that ability of scale, those 51,000 plus customers that we have, the hundreds of thousands of firewalls we have deployed globally around the world, the tens of millions of endpoints that we have, the petabytes of data that we look at in SaaS applications every day, looking for new threats. And we analyze them based on static analysis. So looking at, the characteristics of the file, just quickly giving it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Dynamic analysis, where we actually detonate it in a sandbox and get more detailed information about what this particular file type does. If we can't get a verdict there, we'll actually run it on bare metal, so on a true operating system, on a workstation itself, so it can't do sandbox evasion techniques or those kind of things. And then use a machine learning to also analyze. So all those things are multiple levels of analysis that we do for a file type that we've never seen before. Now, the good news is because we're deployed in so many different places, there aren't that many that we haven't seen already. So we can really drill in and focus heavily on those things that we now see. Once we have all of that information, it's very easy for us to take that and share it across our ecosystem. And I'll show you what that looks like here in a second. But that's the goal, is to take this information and make it readily available to all of our different components deployed across the critical areas of architecture where you need security deployed, and make sure that you have the full protection. So what that means is if we learn of a new threat from an endpoint, we also make your URL filtering smarter. We make your firewall smarter. We make your SaaS protection smarter. And similarly, if we learn it from some other way from the network, we make your endpoint smarter. We make your SaaS protection smarter. And that's the goal, is to have consistent security across all the areas of architecture and all the components working together. And to do this, we really focus on 3 primary products, right? We have our firewalls, which are really focused on physical firewalls to be able to be deployed at your internet perimeter, to be able to deploy for internal LAN segmentation, the virtual firewalls to be able to be deployed in your data center to do micro-segmentation, so on VMware's ESXi or NSX, Cisco's ACI, Citrix Zen Server. So anywhere you need to do micro-segmentation, we can do that with the VM series. And then also taking that same VM series and be able to deploy that in cloud. So if you have deployments that are going to run in Microsoft Azure or AWS or Google Cloud, we can take that VM series and give you the same security protections, all the same features, all the same functionality that you get from a physical firewall and a virtual appliance. And then the next pieces that we focus on is moving outside of what we can see from a network layer. So Traps is our advanced endpoint protection, so that ability to be able to prevent malicious executables from running on the workstation, to also preventing exploits, so exploitation of the OS, exploitation of applications that are running on your systems. That's the protection that Traps gives, but it also ties into Wildfire to be able to provide file types that we've not seen before, that maybe we didn't see from the network because of encryption or because of some other category that we're not decrypted on, like healthcare or financial services or something like that, that's not allowed for us to be able to get into. We can still see that from the endpoint and get a verdict on that particular file. And then Aperture allows us to be able to extend that to data that now resides outside your environment. So things like Office 365 or Salesforce or Dropbox or Yammer or those types of applications where you own the data, but you don't own the application, you don't own the infrastructure that it runs on. We can still control data governance, so how those things are shared. Is it PII information? Is it PCI information? Is it credit card information? That type of stuff we can look for and see where it's shared and how it's shared. But also we can look for malicious files, because a lot of the bad guys have figured out, maybe I can't target you because you have good security inside your network, but if I can get to a folder that's shared incorrectly and I can drop a malicious file into one of these applications, it automatically syncs over an encrypted connection that's allowed back into your network. That's an easier avenue for me to target you as an organization and take control. So we do all of that and have all of these sharing that information. And the last piece is autofocus. And autofocus allows us to take all that threat intel data that we gather, the trillions of artifacts that we have, having done this the last 7 years, and look for, do we have coverage? So if the boss comes in and says, hey, I read in the paper this morning that there's this new piece of ransomware or new type of targeted attack. Autofocus can actually go in and show you all the information about it, who the campaign actors are, where it's coming from, and if you've actually seen any incidents of compromise in your environment that match up to that particular piece of malicious code that's out there. So autofocus allows us to do threat hunting, and then it also allows us to be able to integrate with third-party feeds that come in from threat intel. It also allows us to be able to create dynamic block lists that we can push into other products. We've actually used it to where we could learn of an update from Traps endpoints of something being malicious, but then go update the malicious sites they're going to a blue coat box, for instance. That allows us to be able to do that with autofocus. So again, the whole point of this is the automation and the threat intel. This is what's critical. So our threat intelligence cloud, what we call Wildfire, it's our ability to be able to sandbox and do dynamic analysis as well as bare metal analysis for files that come in from our products. Obviously, our firewalls, hundreds of thousands of those deployed across, almost any environment that you can imagine: healthcare, education, large corporations, tens of millions of endpoints, all collecting threat intel data, and then all the SaaS applications that we look at for our customers. But in addition to that, we also have a lot of third-party feeds. We helped start with Fortinet, the Cyber Threat Alliance. There's now about 55 manufacturers that are a part of that. So it also includes now Cisco and Checkpoint, in addition to us and Fortinet, McAfee, Symantec. There's a lot of organizations, and to be a member, you have to share at least 1,000 new threats a day, and we do that on an ongoing basis. So that's another 60 or 70,000 threats that come in. We also have a very tight integration and partnership with Proofpoint. Proofpoint looks at about 18 to 20 billion emails every single day. So the amount of threat intel data that we can share with them is very large. Same thing with Tanium. We also have ties into some of the government agencies like the FBI, Homeland Security, InfraGard. Those guys share information with us as well. And we share our intel data with them. We believe fundamentally that we shouldn't be competing on threat intel. We believe we should be competing on what you can do with that intelligence. So we think we should share everything, and we hope to. The problem right now is some of the protocol sticks and tacks we actually break in sharing the amounts of data that we have. And so we're looking at working with some organizations to create some better protocols to actually share threat intel data, and we think we should make that available and ambiguous to everybody. And then from looking at from an integration, from a security operating platform, it really means having these products deployed as sensors throughout your environment so we can collect the threat intel data that we need, but then also make these as the enforcement point. So that ability we learn something that's malicious, shared across all of these appliances, not only in your environment, but also all of our customers. So, some 51,000 plus customers are constantly learning throughout the day, and every 5 minutes we're updating all of these appliances with new threat intel data, both in our Wildfire updates, but also in our URL filtering, in our DNS protections. All of those things are constantly being updated to the latest threat intel information that's available. without any manual intervention. That means you don't have to go in and manually take a response to actually get things remediated and get the security protections in place. It automatically happens throughout the day as the environment changes. So if we learn of some new threat in Europe this morning or Asia Pac last night, before your staff even shows up, they're already protected with the latest information. And you can see this with a lot of the threats that have gone on. If you go back and look at NotPetya, WannaCry, some of the things that made the paper, our protections were in place within minutes of the time that we first saw those incidents occur, and all of our customers were protected. We get lots of calls going, this new piece of ransomware came out. It's another day in the office for us. We detect those things. We go ahead and create the protections, and we push it out to all of our customers around the globe on an ongoing basis. So it's really what we do. If you look at it from some of the third-party information, this is an interesting one from one of our analysts where they're talking to our resellers, talking to our customers, and they say that, resellers have seen that customers are saying they have a preference for integrated products that are part of a broader platform rather than best-of-breed point products. And so the good thing about this is that this is what CISOs are asking for. If you go to any CISO and ask them, they really don't want an additional bolt-on product to add into their security mix. They know the burden of that. They all have open headcount. They struggle with finding good security resources. They're expensive. They're hard to keep on board because they're in such high demand. They really want a solution that doesn't add more burden to their existing staff. They want something that works together in an integrated fashion. And that's obviously what Palo Alto Networks has been selling for many years, and part of the reason for our overall success. This is another one from a different analyst, and they were talking to, again, resellers talking to their customers. And they said here that, customers have expressed a high degree of satisfaction characterizing Palo Alto Networks offering as simply the best. And they cited granularity, ease of use, unified platform, single pane of glass as primary sources of satisfaction. So again, having that ability to be able to do that is really resonating with our customer base and really solving the challenges and the problems that they see in the marketplace. This is another one that kind of shows ease of deployment or ease of setup, ease of management configuration. And it's interesting here, kind of the two of us that show up here is us and Barracuda. We really don't compete much with Barracuda. They're in a different market space than we are. But compared to the other vendors that claim to have a platform story, you can see a significant difference in how they perceive our product to be deployed. This isn't us telling you this. This is anecdotal evidence from a third party that really doesn't have any skin in the game. They're just trying to figure out what is the easiest security solution. And the easier it is, the more you remove complexity, the more you remove risk, because the biggest risk in most organizations is things not being set up properly, and people not monitoring and staying on top of the alerts that come in. And those are the things, if you look, there's a survey that was done by Gartner where they actually said that if you look at most of the threats, about 97, 98% of the time, most of the time it was human error. Something wasn't set up properly or something wasn't being monitored properly as to why events actually occurred. It's rarely technology breakdown, but if you don't have a product that's easy to use, one that people want to use, you really don't get the security protections that you need. And then before I jump into the demo, there's a couple of other things that we do fundamentally as a company that we want to make sure that our customers are leveraging our products to the best of their ability, and they have a real process in place on how they want to deploy their security strategy. And around these, we have a couple of tools. One of those being the prevention posture assessment. This is just a questionnaire that we sit down with a customer and we go through. There's about 82 different questions that talk about the different areas of architecture, and it goes through where are you today and where do you want to be, to be fully protected in these areas. And it walks them through all the critical areas that they need. And it just creates kind of a heat map of where you are and where you need to go from a roadmap perspective over the next 12 to 18 months, realizing that, budget cycles are different for each organization. What they may already have investments in takes time to be able to move those things off the books and move to some newer solutions. So this is a process to help, kind of start from a net new customer and figure out where they want to go and put a plan in place on how to get there. So this is a great tool. It generates about a 25 to 30 page report. It's very graphical. It looks very nice. It's very easy to go sit down with an executive and have a conversation of kind of, not to call your baby ugly, but to say, hey, here's where we are and here's where we know we need to go. And a lot of customers have had huge success with going and getting the funding that they need and the support they need to actually, have a roadmap and a plan of where they need to go from a security strategy perspective. The next one is to really go for existing customers. And this is something we encourage our partners to make a regular cadence of going in and talking to their customers about. And it's two reports. One is called the Capability Feature Adoption Heat Map, and that says, okay, you've bought our solution. Are you leveraging all the capabilities of the product? And we have lots of customers that say, I bought whatever solution is, but I don't know if it was deployed properly. I don't know if I'm leveraging all the capabilities in it. This is a tool that allows us to very quickly be able to do that. We pull a file off the box, we run it through a tool, and it spits out a nice heat map that's, kind of red, yellow, green, and it shows, all the areas and features that are available in the product you have. Are you leveraging those capabilities? And it shows you where you're deficient and where you may need to improve. So that's a great tool. And the other one is the best practices assessment, which takes all the switches, features, and knobs that you can turn on our product, and it gives you a pass or fail. So is this compliant with Palo Alto Network's recommended best practices? And we think this should be run, at least every 6 months to make sure that things are staying current, because things are always changing. And make sure that your environment is properly deployed and that you have the best protection in place. So that's another tool that we leverage a lot. Our Expedition tool is a migration tool that can actually leverage that information that comes out of the best practices assessment and actually create a config file that you can push into your box and get it compliant. So now it takes that lift from, a couple of days to actually have an engineer go through and figure that out, to now you can create an actual config file and go push it in. It also makes it easy to be able to convert. So if you're converting from, any of our primary competitors, Cisco, Checkpoint, Fortinet, WatchGuard, whomever, we actually have the ability to take in their config files and then convert them over into Palo Alto Networks, and then also look at it to make sure that we're not just creating like for like rules, meaning we're not creating just port and protocol rules over on the Palo Alto box, but actually help with the migration from port and protocol rules to application rules. And that's really a key tenet of what we do. And this really removes a lot of the heavy lift that's needed to be able to migrate from one vendor to another. And then ongoing, measurements, we want to make sure we're still doing security lifecycle reviews, which go in and look and analyze all the applications you have running in your environment. Does it make sense to have these? Continuing to look at the best practices assessment to make sure it's current, and using the capability heat maps to make sure we're migrating to fully deployed over time. And so those are the tools that we have. We make these available. They don't cost anything. They're free. All of our partners can run these, as well as, some of these are available to customers to be able to run directly themselves. And so with that, I'll stop and see if there's any questions, and then I'm going to jump in and do a demo to show you kind of some of the integrations that we have. Any questions? Anything on the chat or anything?
So Mike, one question that came up
Sure.
Around the capabilities of Palo Alto. A lot of folks are using these sort of arbitrary or intermediaries for their cloud management. So like Cloud Generas or Turbonomics, or they're using these tools to, work between their cloud environment and their private hosted environment. Could you speak to the deployment model or the capabilities of Palo Alto in those types of scenarios?
Yeah, sure. So this same system that I'm in here is what we call Panorama. Panorama is our centralized management system. It will manage all of our firewalls, whether those be physical firewalls, whether they're virtual firewalls, whether they're deployed on-prem, whether they're deployed in the cloud. You can create you get the same interface. So one pane of glass to be able to manage all of your firewalls from one location and be able to see, all of the threat intel data. Everything I'm going to show you here in this would be your management system to manage those devices, whether they are in your physical data center, whether they're in AWS, whether they're in Azure, maybe they're all in all of those. You can manage them all from one single console and have all your alerts, all your threats in one place. So that's been a key feature of what we do. Now, if you're in a multi-vendor environment, so you're not all Palo Alto, then yeah, there are other integrations that we have with companies like Firemon or AlgoSec or something like that can be able to manage multiple vendors and give you a single pane of glass to be able to do that. And then we also integrate with almost all the SIM vendors, so things like Splunk or ArcSight or Logarithm, any of those we can also integrate with as well to be able to give you a single console for all your alerts to be able to go into, and we support those as well. So hopefully that answers your question. If not, I'll try again.
No, that's great. Just
Any
going
others?
to the attendee list. Any other questions from the folks?
Hey, Mike, just touch on policy enforcement, how we activate, and also how our eco partners are all part of the process and the API exposure.
Yeah. So again, I'm going to show you here in the demo some of the policies that will be created, and I'm going to walk you through kind of that enforcement model, and then how we're actually looking at some of the integrations between those. But yes, we can integrate in with if we're talking about, we have some tight integrations with VMware, so we can work in their ESX environment, we can work with their NSX environment, we can put our virtual firewalls, they're actually deployed as a service in the NSX environment, they're actually deployed as a security host in the ESX environment. We route the traffic to go through those so we can put that security protection in place. Same way with ACI, we work with those. And then we also have relationships type integrations with Proofpoint. So if you're actually a Proofpoint customer that's managing your email environment, we can actually correlate events. So we get secondary and additional threat inspection. So whenever they see a file, they'll get a verdict, we'll get a verdict, we'll compare the verdicts, and then depending on who we look at as the source, they may be different. We may still mark it as being something that's malicious, even if we differ on what we've seen. And we share that threat intel data all the time. We also have a great partnership with HP, so Aruba ClearPath, so we can tie into their wireless controllers and be able to identify users, and then once we've identified those users, get control over that, so we can leverage that integration that we have with those guys. And then we integrate well with all the cloud providers. So we have some very good partnerships with AWS, Azure, Google Cloud. Those are all integration points that we have to be able to deploy our solutions in any of those environments and all manage it, from our perspective via Panorama. It's really the single pane of glass to be able to manage everything. Any others? Okay. So let me walk you through just a quick demo of some of the capabilities from an integration perspective. And this is interesting. This is what we call our automated correlation engine. So this takes events from multiple areas of the environment, and these rules were actually created by our Unit 42. So our threat researchers, these guys are super uber smart. They're constantly looking at all the threat intel data that we collect in our Wildfire cloud, and they're creating not only looking at the events that are going on, but trying to figure out, are there things that we can look at that are highly correlated, that we can really have a high sense of focus that these things are really malicious. So to give you, for example, here's one that's a Wildfire C2. So what this says is we've identified a malicious file that came in through Wildfire. So, it could have been a Java file, a Flash file, a PDF, whatever. We identified it as being malicious. We know the domains that it connects to whenever that file detonates. And what we've seen here is that now we're seeing other objects in your environment make connections to that command and control site. So that means either that host that originally received the file is now trying to make call outs to it because it's infected, or we've seen that, hey, we've identified this, and now we're seeing other hosts on your network also make call outs to that same command and control server. We may be stopping them, we're blocking them, but the reality is those devices have already been compromised. And now if we see other hosts making call outs to that same command and control, we know that piece of malware has the capability to move laterally across your organization. So it can move from different hosts. And the risk there is that if one of those devices goes off network for whatever reason, it's not anymore protected by our solution, they're going to make that connection to that command and control site. So those machines still need to be cleaned up, even though they're protected when they're behind our solution. Some of the other ones we have is the ability to look for credential theft. So now we're seeing that, has made, we've seen devices that are actually making connections to, we're seeing where they're actually logging into multiple hosts, but failing authentication. So we're seeing that, instead of having it go to a machine and just fail 200 times to authenticate on that device, what attackers will sometimes do is go to multiple machines and only try to log in one or two times so they can stay below the radar of an alert. But it's still the same user trying to log in, but now on multiple machines using a failed account to try to break or compromise that password. We can actually identify those things. Looking for exploit kit activity. So now we can see that we're seeing that this has signatures that match exploit kits. So it might be Angler, it might be Code Orange, it might be hundreds of different types of exploit kits. Once those are on there, they generally aren't causing the attack right at that time, but what they're doing is collecting information. What OS are you running? What applications are you running? Once they get all that intel data, they can go back and then search what are the known vulnerabilities for this particular version of this, Adobe Reader or Adobe Flash or whatever it is that's running on your machine. and then target your organization for attack based on leveraging those exploits that they know are known vulnerabilities. So again, being able to see these things is really important. And these are just the rules. So these are what the objects are created on. And then we can actually go in and actually see if we have any events. And you can see here, we have an event here that this particular, device is actually probably compromised by an exploit kit with an XOR obfuscation piece of malware. This one we're seeing is, we've got it classified as medium, but it's visited a known malware URL 78 times. So chances are good that device has also been compromised. It doesn't mean they're getting through. We're probably blocking these because hopefully we've got it set up to block malicious URLs. That's a category we wouldn't allow our users to go to. But again, because the machine's making those call outs to it, it's probably trying to set up a C2 connection. So it probably is compromised and needs to be cleaned up. So we can quickly see these, and we can scroll through these and see all the ones. If we want to just clear it down to the critical ones, we can just go in and set a filter to be able to do that, and it'll just pull those up. So again, we can get really granular. And if we see any of these we know are devices that are pretty high probability are compromised. We're focusing on the things that are really important. Even if we're protecting them, we still need to go in and do some work. So that's a great way to be able to look at it. Another thing that we can do very easily from here is we can go into our, what we call the ACC, or our Application Command Center. And this, we get a lot of information here. So we can just see, what applications we have running our network, who the users are that are accessing those, how many bytes they've actually sent over time, their, IP address information, what country codes they're calling out to. If there's certain countries that I don't do business with, I might want to drill into those and see why I have, Bob in accounting's making connections to, servers in China, for instance. These are all good places that I can get a lot of information. But if I want to drill into the threat activity, I can actually go in here and I can see at a real high level, break it down by viruses, vulnerabilities, spyware. So if I want to see the vulnerabilities, I can go in and drill into those, and I can see exactly what those vulnerabilities are that are on my environment. And I can, filter in on any that are really critical to me and see the information. If I have credential theft, I can look for those. If I'm looking for compromised host, I can see that information as well. And again, I can drill in and see who this user is. I can see their IP address. I can see the type of threat that's actually going on. So again, it gets me focused on the things that are really important. I can break them down by file type, so I can see, how many threats I have that are portable executables, how many are flash, how many are jar files. I can look into those things and actually see and get specific details about any of one of those that I want to drill into. If I want to see URL information, I can see that I have users here that are going to whatever URL site. So if I wanted to see, this user, Marsha Worth, has actually gone in 30 different times. If I want to go see what those are, I can actually see the actual URLs, and I can go in and look at these specifically, and it'll actually take me into the actual log data that I want to look at. So, I can drill into this in great levels of detail. If I want to jump directly to the logs, I could do that. And it would just show me specifically what this particular user is doing. And it goes ahead and creates the filter for me, and it can show me, exactly what they're going to and what categories these are in, and make sure that I have my protections in place. So this is a really useful tool for us to be able to analyze a lot of information within the system. If I want to look at wildfire submissions, I've got a filter created here. A lot of times these things come up, and you'll see this cryptic name like cnipg.exe. Okay, I don't know if that's something really important or not. I know that for some reason wildfire is detecting this as being malicious, but I don't really know the reasons why. And what wildfire does is, and all I'm doing here is jumping into autofocus so that I can see an actual summary of the information itself. But the way wildfire functions, so in this case, we had an exe file that came into the system. So what we do is we quickly check to see if we've ever seen that file before. If we've seen it, we already have a verdict. If we haven't seen it, then we send it up to wildfire and we have it inspected. The first thing we're going to do is just static analysis. So we're going to look at it and give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down as to whether it's good or bad. Then we're going to look at it with machine learning. So actually put some thought algorithms into it as we look at the characteristics of the file to determine if it's good or bad. If we can't get a verdict there, then we're actually going to detonate it on a virtual machine. So we run our own custom built hypervisor, which also helps prevent sandbox evasions. And Then we're going to detonate the file and look at, what it does. So not only what the file does changes to the machine, so changes to the registry settings, DNS entries, proxy settings, any of those things that are done on the machine, we'll certainly capture those. But then we also look for the rest of the threat intel data. So what URLs does this call out to? What DNS entries does this try to make connections to? Are there any specific IP addresses associated with this file? And we collect all that information, and then we have our, we collect as much of that information as we can, and we push that into, now this is a known malware domain, this particular DNS entry is bad. All of that threat intel data gets pushed to PanDB, it gets pushed to our threat prevention capabilities, it gets pushed out as updates to all of our component firewalls. But we'll also take, in our Unit 42 guys, we'll actually append tags to it, because let's be honest, most of our customers that are running ours don't have a SOC analyst on staff. They don't have, in many cases, they don't have, a dedicated incident response team. And obviously our bigger customers do, but some of the smaller ones don't. We'll actually append tags to these files. So now as a firewall operator, you can look at this and say, okay, I now know that this is tied to different campaigns. So the informational tags are generally tags that are called out by multiple vendors. For some reason, we don't have a standard of what we call a particular piece of malware. So in this case, you can see there's a tag here for iDrop, and there's going to be a couple of others that show up here in a minute. But if you click on it, iDrop will tell you that, hey, this is a backdoor Trojan install that allows you to be able to install additional malware onto this particular device. So now we know what campaign it's in. We also have, one for Morass. That's another name that people call it. And, this one describes it as not only being able to install malware, but it's also a worm, meaning that it can propagate from host to host individually on its own. And then we also will append our Unit 42 tags. So our Unit 42 tags are operationally, what does this file do to the system whenever it runs? And as soon as you see those pop up here in just a second, it'll actually show you that this particular file disables the local firewall on the box. It changes the user access control settings on the box. So there's a wealth of information. So now as a firewall operator, I know, this file is bad and here's the reasons why it's bad. And that helps me to be able to get a lot more threat intel data about this particular file and what it's doing, and provide a lot better understanding to my organization as to why this is important. So you can see here, it modifies the Windows firewall, so it changes the registry settings to be able to allow it to run. It also disables the regedit tools, which means that it's hard to be able to remove this file because it disables the ability to do registry editing on the file itself. It does process injection, so it actually injects other files into legitimate running processes on my machine. And it disables the user access control, which is built into the Windows operating system and should always be turned on. So having this information, I know a lot about it. But if I wanted to go get more detailed information, I can click on any one of these, and it'll actually go in and pull into autofocus, and it'll give me, all the information. And again, part of the reason why it takes a minute for it to pull up is because autofocus is our, artifact. It's all the threat intel data we have in Wildfire. So trillions, there's about 2.5 trillion files that we've been able to collect over time, both good and bad. And now I can go in and look at any of these, and you can see there's tons already showing up, but over time, it'll show me all of the ones that are in here. But any one of them that I wanted to go look at, I could go get more detailed information about the file analysis that was actually run. So when we detonated this file, what did it do? And you can see the tags that get added there, but now I can look at the actual registry settings that were changed. We've actually had instances where we've had traps running or had a firewall running, and we've actually detected a file. And we go ask the users, hey, did you detonate this file? And they'll say, of course not. A security guy shows up and says, hey, did you launch this file that came in through email? They're obviously always going to say no. We can then go into the machine because we know the registry editing that was done. We can actually go in and see, was the registry changed to any of these parameters? And we know that definitely they did run the file, and it is malicious in nature. So I can get all of that threat intel data directly from here. And I can also go get more detailed information about, the DNS entries that this guy's connecting to, any HTTP requests that it's going to. If you give this to a threat researcher, they can go in, and this saves them tons of time because their day normally consists of, hey, we saw this anomaly. Here's the alerts we got. What is this doing? You can take that same information, go into autofocus, and it'll show you everything that we know about that particular file. and what it's done over time. And then from here, we can actually check to see if it's actually protected. So do we have coverage for it? Are we actually protected for this? And you can actually, in this case, it's URLs, and you can see the domains that they go to. If it was an actual file itself, we would actually see if we have the threat protection signatures in place to be able to prevent this from coming in. So again, a lot of detailed information in what we can do. And autofocus was actually just a tool that we invented internally to allow our threat researchers to look at all this data we have. We showed it to a few customers, and they went, "Oh my, we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars for threat intel feeds. This is much better than anything we can get from those. We'd love to buy this." So we commercialized it, made it a product, and made it available to be able to go out and use it in our customers' environment. So it's just another tool that you can leverage to be able to, get more detailed information about a particular, piece of ransomware. And if the boss comes in and says, "Hey, I've heard about this thing," you can go in here and do a search for it, and you can see all the threat information that's available to you from being able to actually go in and look at it. It also has a dashboard, so you can actually see how your environment is running. So what types of threat has come in on specific points in time, what the top applications are, what the top malware are broken down by individual firewall, what your top, things that you're seeing in your environment are. And then you can also break it down not only by your particular site, but also your industry. So it can compare how you're doing against your particular industry, whether that's financial services or healthcare, whatever it is. And then we can show you all the faults. So what have we seen from every customer that's a member of, that's leveraging Wildfire and their data that's contained in here. So it's a very useful tool. I mean, I could spend literally hours going through the actual tool itself, but this just shows you how you can leverage that directly from the firewall and jump in to get more detailed information from the actual device itself. If we wanted to look at what the file did when we ran it, we could go in here and actually look at the Wildfire analysis report. This would actually show us, everything that the file did when we detonated it inside of Wildfire, and give us some pretty good detail about what that particular file looks like. So in this case, you can see that we ran it on, in this case, one XP machine. And you can see that it created a folder, it executed a file in the Windows system folder, it created modified files, it spawned new processes, deleted itself, injected code into another process, modified the registry settings. You can see all of that information from the report itself, and you can pull down the whole report in a PDF file, so you can go show it to, a threat analyst or, other organizations that may need to look at it. And this is a pretty detailed information about the particular threat. So I'll stop there. That's really all I wanted to show from a demo perspective, is that we are really leveraging this ecosystem, and all that threat intel data we get, we share across the infrastructure, which goes back to making sure you have, all the products deployed in the proper locations that they need to be deployed, and that all of them are working together to automate the security protections that are in place, which takes less of a burden on your staff and less load on them to actually go down and track threats. They can quickly go in and identify what's going on in their environment and make sure that they're already protected in an automated fashion. So with that, I'll open it up, see if you guys have any questions, see what else I might be able to answer.
So Mike, thanks so much. Jamie Durgan with 5S Technologies. Just wanted to see if there was any questions out there. One of the questions, Mike, is does Palo Alto have a remote access product?
We do. So we actually have built into the product what we call Global Protect. And Global Protect is our VPN solution for two things. When we look at remote access, we look at it in terms of remote users. So, users that go off network. We have an actual client. I use it here on my box. I actually run Global Protect all the time. And it connects into our firewalls, like a VPN gateway. But in addition to encrypting the traffic through an IPsec tunnel, it also ensures that all the security protections are in place. So whether I'm at a hotel or the airport or Starbucks, I get the same level of protections, just like I'm connected to my corporate environment through the protections that are available. So that includes all the threat prevention capabilities, the command and control protection, the vulnerability protection, Wildfire. All of those features and capabilities of the product are provided to any remote user, regardless of where they're connecting. The other piece we look at is remote offices. So if you're connecting a branch location back into your corporate, we can actually connect those using the Global Protects on the firewalls or in a cloud provided service to be able to quickly connect up those remote sites and provide that same level of security to all of our branch offices. If we use the cloud version of that, we don't have to have a Palo Alto Networks box at the remote site. You can use anything that will do an IPsec connection. So if you have an existing firewall there, if you have a router at that location, all you need to do is point it to the cloud instance, and all your security policies are done at the firewall in the cloud. We actually use AWS to spin this up. We take on the lift of setting up the infrastructure. All you do is write your security policies, but we can spin that up in the matter of minutes. It doesn't take days, weeks, or months to actually deploy a solution to get all your remote sites set up and working. And then you don't have to deploy 20 firewalls at all those remote sites. It's just determining the bandwidth requirements that you have, and you get all the same security protections. So all the threat prevention capabilities, all the URL filtering capabilities, wildfire, all of that stuff is built directly into the product. So when we think in terms of remote access, we think of it as actual users and workstations as well as remote sites, and we can certainly provide protections for all of those.
Great, thank you, Mike.
Yeah, hey, Mike, just one other quick thing about compliance and remediation items that a lot of people are always concerned about reports and having to go and do inventory and figure out what's compliant, what isn't. Can you just touch on that briefly, and then we can wrap it up?
Yeah, so we have a ton of reports that we can do. So we can actually go in and all the PDF reports are here, so you can actually go in and pull a whole summary of reports. You can look at user activity reports. You can look at SaaS application usage reports. All of those are available to you. So if you actually wanted to create, a SaaS application usage report, you can go in here and create one for the last 7 days, 30 days, 90 days. And it'll actually pull all the information about the SaaS applications that are running on your environment. And from there, it can show you, okay, what could we block? Maybe you got 42 different file sharing applications. Does it really make sense to use ForShare or ZippyShare or something like that? And you can also break it down to show the financial stability of that particular application, the terms of service for that application, because some of the SaaS applications actually, when you put your data there, you no longer own the data. You actually give rights over to the provider of that service to the data. And so if that is the case and they have poor financial stability, what's going to happen if that company goes out of business, or if they get sold, or what happens when some of those things you can look at and go, these just don't make good business sense. We're going to take these off the network. So you can control that with the firewall. For the ones that you're going to allow, you probably want to use Aperture to be able to go in and get more granular control over those applications. So now you can scan all the information that's out there, look for PII information, look for PCI information, look for HIPAA information, and we can give you reports that show, hey, here's the violations you have that are based on these particular compliancy rules, and show you very quickly what you may need to remediate and change to make sure that those things from a data governance perspective are in place to be compliant with those rules and regulations. If you're moving into the cloud, we acquired a company a few months ago called Evident.io, and Evident.io goes through and shows all of those things, looking at it from a cloud infrastructure perspective. So do you have, are you rotating your keys on a regular basis? Are you leveraging login accounts that aren't the root account? Do you have all your users? Because if all your users are logging in as root, that's a horrible thing. Or, are you compliant with NIST, NIST 583? Are you compliant with the regulations for that? Are you compliant with HIPAA compliance? Are you compliant with CIS controls? And it actually lays that out for all your cloud infrastructure and can give you a report. It even has GDRP in there associated with it. So that's another tool that we have to be able to do that, not only from your private infrastructure, but also what you might be moving into the cloud. And it does an amazing job of being able to do that. And it shows you all the risk, and it also shows you all the reports. So the Evident piece is huge as we have more and more folks moving into the cloud environment from a compliancy perspective. But if you get those reports and you show them to a compliance officer, they light up like a Christmas tree, because it shows them real clearly what risk they have associated right now and what they may need to change.
Mike, thanks very much. And everyone, thanks again for taking time today. We'll be sending a follow-up email to everybody thanking you. And if you have any questions that you'd like to have answered, just simply respond, and we'll be more than happy to assist you with those questions. Again, Mike, thanks very much. Thank everybody who's been on the call, and we'll look forward to talking to you next time.
Sounds great. Thanks, everybody.